Amogos.
Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm your host, Mighty Bjorn, and today for you I have another Sprocket Community Steel video. Going to be showing some vehicles here today, and the first one for the show opener, if you will, was actually the SKL Amogus, and that was done by Colson, which is one of the moderators for the official Sprocket Discord channel, as well as my channel. But moving on, today the first tank is the EVH 37E Raging Storm from Daniel Paladin. Now he's actually got a series of these vehicles, but I picked this one because, well, this one's actually the most odd, yet unique and cool looking of his series. And this weighs in at 13.33 tons. It's got armed with a 37 millimeter main gun that has 65 millimeters of penetration. He also has a 7 by 50 millimeter coaxial, which is very interesting that he chose a 7 millimeter. And this is for the early war period. It's actually not a bad vehicle. I mean, the armor, nothing to brag about, neither is the gun, but it does do the trick for the most part for the early war period. That being said, I felt the mobility of the vehicle was actually really good. I wouldn't say it's really fast, but the hull traverse speed is very good and things of that nature. And I did actually really like that. I also felt the turret traverse, while slow, is functional for early war period, especially because there's still quite a few tanks that has slower turret traverse motors, as well as some of the vehicles are hand cranked in this time period, or at least so my experience, that's what I have. But either ways, I think it's a really cool looking vehicle. It's definitely got a unique style to it. It definitely has that feel of designers didn't really know what they were fully doing yet, but they were getting a better idea of what a tank should be and what it should look like and general things of that nature. As well as the other thing that's pretty unique, I feel, to the vehicle itself is it actually has a rear mounted turret. Typically your turrets are either towards the center or more towards the front of the vehicle, but this one actually has a front mounted engine with the driver also in the front, and then the turret is on the rear. And it actually, in my opinion, actually makes for a very unique style, feel, and etc. The turret is also isn't asymmetrical, as you can see there, and I think I do give a better look at the turret here in a minute. It's got a really unique turret shape that I've never really seen before, but I actually really like with this vehicle. You know, once again, just a really unique style to the vehicle, and I think that's actually really cool, and that makes this stand out. Unfortunately, I don't know what it is. I have some of the worst luck when it comes to loading vehicles, and the decals, for some odd reason, not all the decals loaded, and that's probably more on me, but Sprocket can be a little fickle about that at times. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. And the next one I have here is the KV 109 from Coast 05, and this weighs in at 51 tons. It's armed with an 85 millimeter main gun with 146 millimeters of penetration. It is for the mid-war period, so we are looking more towards, 1942, 1943 is when this would be from. I'm not sure if this is actual legit or planned version of a KV tank, but it does have definitely a KV style hull, and the turret is very unique in itself. It is kind of a big turret, which really isn't 100% unique compared to Soviet vehicles, because Soviet vehicles of this time period tend to have big turrets. But the shaping of the turret, I feel, is really unique. I like how he did the gun mantlet, gun mantlet looks great. The hull looks great too. As I said, it pointed out that it is a KV-1 style hull. I feel this tank could actually be easily upgraded for the late war period by actually switching to like a 107 instead of an 85. So that can be said as well. Automotively speaking, mobility, not bad, not great either. It's kind of like middle of the road of where it's just good enough. When it comes to the gun, I did have some slight problems with accuracy, mostly because I'm old and shit, but when it comes to the power and its killing capabilities, it's mostly good on that end. I mean, it wouldn't hurt with a bit more penetration because, yeah, heavier tanks come around the corner here when we're talking 1942-ish, but it still does work for the most part. And the armor, for the most part, is actually pretty reliable, especially if you keep the vehicle hull down. It's very reliable. It's the hull actually gets a little bit questionable, is where it gets questionable, especially with the more powerful guns of like what you find on like a Panther. But all in all, I think the vehicle's pretty good, looks good, and he definitely took some time and put in some detail. Okay, the next vehicle I have here today is the M60A3 from Gentle Bean. And this weighs in at 50 tons. It has a 105 millimeter main gun with 131 millimeters of penetration. He also does have the turret 50 cal, the mini TC turret, if you will, the tumor turret with the 50 cal modeled with a 50 cal in it. It is for the late war period. Obviously, this is a Cold War tank. This is actually a later Cold War tank, as the M60A3 actually would have been around and in production even for the Abrams, actually just a bit before the Abrams. Now, I do have one thing to say. While I think the mobility is good, the armor did hold up during my test. The 131 millimeters of penetration, while it was good enough for what I was going up against, it's honestly not good enough. 131 millimeters of penetration, I mean, you know, we're talking like the 76 millimeter main gun on the Sherman, which is like 20, 30 years before this thing. So, yeah, that's kind of a disappointment in itself. The 50 cal doesn't have a whole lot of penetration, but it would work great against infantry if there was infantry in the game, as well as light aircraft. Other than that, like the vehicle, it looks great. The gun depression is really good. The mobility isn't bad either. I wouldn't say it was super fast, but it was good enough for the job. As well as the hull traverse. Some of the vehicles I've been dealing with, the hull traverse has been kind of iffy. The hull traverse on this one actually isn't bad. So all in all, yeah, not a bad tank from Gentle Bean, and it actually does look like an M60A3. Alright, the next one here, I have a bit of an oddity here. This is the Tiger 3 from Cambo Man. This weighs in at 105 tons, and well, I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure why. I mean, the tank really doesn't look like it should weigh 105 tons, to be honest. It is armed with a 128 millimeter main gun, and it's got 216 millimeters of penetration. The gun is actually very good on this. I'll give them credit for that. I also think the camo paint looks really good. I think the turret isn't bad. It's got a nice design to it. I kind of question the method of putting spare fuel tanks on the turret, as they wouldn't be, you couldn't connect them to the fuel system. With having a full 360 degree traverse turret, your fuel tanks would be one of those, you'd have to siphon fuel out of the fuel tanks into the fuel tank itself, the primary fuel tank. Now this is for the late war period as well. It's got a lot of spaced armor. Now personally, I feel it could actually be wider as a whole and a little bit longer. The side skirts need moved out a bit more. Well, the side skirts that's over the tracks, I feel, needs moved out a bit more. And we definitely need to work on the rear end there. The exhaust clips through the road wheels, I noticed, the Sprocket wheels. I do like the idea of extra armor around the turret, although the plates probably could be moved in a bit more. Got the German logo there, that looks fine. I mean, honestly, for the most part, like the turret shaping, I like the turret shape itself. It's got a pike nose, I think that's actually really awesome. It's got a nice high suspension, which definitely good if you don't want to get your damn vehicle stuck on things. I have to say that much. And that being said, actually for a heavy tank, the mobility is actually really good on this thing. I'll give credit where credit's due for the mobility. I just feel as a personally, overall, it could definitely use a little bit more work. There's a couple little tweaks I would personally make to the vehicle. But yeah, I mean, it's got side armor. The side skirts, for the most part, are fine. On the upper hull, it's the lower hull. But nah, whatever. Neither here nor there. The gun is still awesome, and the mobility is still awesome. The next one I have here is from Substep, and this is the T3485 PTU. This weighs in at 25 tons. It is armed with an 85 millimeter gun with 161 millimeters of penetration, and it is for the late war period. And I do have to say, the reload speed on this is actually rather good. I kept bouncing shots though. I think that's more or less me being old shit more than anything else. Just hitting these vehicles at odd angles. Also, I was firing APHE. I think the vehicle would definitely benefit from having some actual AP ammo. Now that being said, the armor on this thing was definitely not reliable. Now it is a medium tank, closer to actually a light tank at 25 tons, and it doesn't really actually have a turret. It has more of a, I don't know, an auto-loading gun, and it's just a gun mounted on top of what should be a turret, kind of like the M1 TTB, the tank testbed prototype, if you will. There's some other vehicles too that also benefit from the, robotic automated guns, and that's kind of what this has going on with it. Now, when it comes to the mobility on this thing is wicked good. And as you can see, it's in a fairly small package. I mean, the footprint of the tank is still the size of a tank, but definitely has a really low cut hull. And I really like the details. I like the concept. I like the idea behind this vehicle. And once again, it's another vehicle that looks like it could be per se a realistic vehicle, although definitely way before its actual time. But maybe, if you will, some kind of modernization for old T3485s. Not like I don't think anybody would want to actually update an old T3485, but there it is, folks. That's pretty much what I think about it. But anyway, that is today's episode of Community Steel. Hopefully you all enjoy it, and thank you very much for tuning in.